Welcome to the dark side of loving. Today's video. You're not just going to hear a story. You're going to live through it. This is not fiction. This is not easy. This is the dark side of love. So take a deep breath and make sure you're watching till the very end, because the moment you think you understand what's happening, everything will change. I walked into my uncle's room, and what I saw changed everything. My name is Elisa. I'm 23 years old. On the outside, I might seem like your average girl. I'm studying graphic design, juggling classes, sketchbooks, and the stress of freelance deadlines just to stay afloat. But behind that normalcy lies a story so complicated, so haunting, that I still wonder how I ever ended up living it. If you told me a year ago that I'd be living with my uncle, not temporarily, but truly embedded in his home, his life, his world, I'd have laughed. Not just because of how absurd it sounded, but because nothing in my life has ever stayed that still. After my parents divorced, my world shattered in quiet, sharp fragments. The sense of home became a memory. I spent years couch hopping, switching cities, switching beds, switching dreams. Nothing held. Nothing lasted. Until Uncle Julian. I never thought of him as uncle in the traditional sense. Yes, he's my mother's older brother. But even when I was a kid, he felt different. He wasn't the loud, joking, boundary-crossing type. He was quiet, observant. The kind of man who noticed when you were silently breaking down and offered help without a single word. When my mom got a sudden job opportunity that required relocating halfway across the world, she asked Julian if he could take me in for a while. He said yes without hesitation. That's how I found myself in the middle of the countryside, far from city lights and the chaos I'd grown used to. His house was peaceful, old yet well-kept, the kind of place where time seems to slow down and silence echoes louder than music. He lived there with his wife, Celeste, and on the surface, they looked like a perfectly synchronized couple, calm, collected, mature. But as I'd learn, the surface lies. At first, living with them felt like intruding on something delicate. I stayed in the farthest guest room, kept my headphones on, tiptoed around their kitchen like I didn't exist. But slowly, routines formed. Celeste began teaching me recipes. Julian started asking me how my designs were going. I started to feel less invisible. Until something changed. Something subtle. Something real. The unspoken beginning didn't plan to feel anything toward Julian. That would be crazy. That would be wrong. But I can't lie. It happened. Not all at once. Not dramatically. It crept in like a fog. It was in the way he'd glance at me when he thought I wasn't looking. The way his voice softened when we spoke. The way his hand would occasionally brush mine when passing the salt, or handing me a glass of water. Each moment was so small, so deniable, until denial itself became impossible. I tried ignoring it. I convinced myself it was stress, that I was just starved for affection, that I was projecting. But deep down, I knew. And the worst part, I could feel it in him too. The tension between us became a silent rhythm, a song we never dared to sing aloud. And it was always strongest when Celeste was away. The silence of the house vibrating with something unnameable. One night, everything cracked open. The night that changed everything. It was just after dinner. Celeste had gone out to meet some friends in the nearby town, and Julian said he was going to lie down early. He looked tired. I was working on a freelance logo project in my room, half lost in color palettes and font pairings, when I heard something. Footsteps. Soft, slow, careful. At first, I thought it might be Celeste back early, but then I remembered she had the car. Then silence again, followed by the creaking sound of a door. Julian's door. Something tugged at me, not fear, but something just as urgent. I stepped out of my room and walked slowly down the hall. His door was slightly ajar. I hesitated. What was I doing? He was asleep. I should have gone back, but something pulled me closer. I opened the door. There he was, lying on his back, the window light drawing soft shadows over his face. One arm behind his head, the other resting near his side. His breathing was calm, the kind that comes from deep sleep or from being at peace. I don't know how long I stood there, watching him. I wasn't trying to be weird. I wasn't trying to be invasive. It just happened. I felt something strange rise in my chest, something that made my breath stutter and my cheeks flush. And then I knocked over a vase by accident. It clattered to the ground, not shattered, but loud enough. Julian stirred. His eyes opened, dazed. They landed on me. We stared at each other, suspended, wordless. A half laugh escaped him, sleep heavy and confused. Elisa, what are you doing? I stammered. I didn't mean to wake you. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes, and then he smiled. That warm, patient smile I'd always known. But something about it felt different now. Softer, closer, realer. It's okay, he said gently. If you ever need to talk, I'm always here. I nodded, unable to speak. My mind was a blur. My heartbeat too loud. My skin too warm. And then he patted the bed beside him. Come, sit. Let's talk. The space between you. He sat down. I shouldn't have. I know that now. But back then, it felt like the only thing I could do. The room was dim, the curtains drawn just enough to let in a sliver of silver moonlight. I could hear the slow rhythm of Julian's breathing, and mine. His body was warm beside me, but not touching. Close enough for awareness, far enough for denial. We didn't speak for a moment. The silence between us said everything and nothing. Then he asked softly, "Are you okay?" It wasn't the words. It was the way he asked, not like an uncle, not like someone older or wiser, but like someone genuinely unsure of the answer and afraid to know it. I don't know. I whispered. I wasn't okay. Not because I was afraid, but because I wasn't. Because it felt like everything in my life, every loss, every drift, every moment I had spent searching for belonging, had somehow led me right here. And what I felt sitting next to Julian didn't feel wrong. It felt like arrival. His fingers moved barely, as if fighting the urge to reach for me. I felt it again. That pulse, the one that made my skin flush and my breath grow shallow. He didn't move. I did. I leaned in, just slightly, to close the gap. Not because I planned to kiss him, not because I even knew what I was doing, but because I needed to feel something that didn't feel like pain. Our eyes met again, and this time, neither of us looked away. His expression didn't shift, but I saw the war behind his gaze, the lines between instinct and responsibility, between guilt and desire, were twisting inside him just as violently as they were in me. And then, like it had happened 1,000 times before in some other life, our lips met. It was a kiss without warning. No buildup, no permission. But it wasn't violent. It wasn't aggressive. It was soft. Hesitant. Like the silence had finally needed a voice. And that was the only one we had left. Something you can't undo. Julian didn't stop me. He didn't pull away. He kissed me back. I remember the exact sensation of it. The warmth of his breath, the softness of his lips, the tension in his shoulders, as if his whole body was resisting the very thing he was doing. But still, he stayed. I felt his hand lift slowly, his palm brushing the side of my face. It was careful, measured. Not lust, not yet. something heavier, something worse, a need that neither of us understood. When we finally pulled away, we didn't say a word. We didn't need to. Our foreheads rested against each other, both of us. Breathing hard, our pulses almost synchronized. And then came the whisper, Eliza. That's all he said. My name. No instructions. No regrets. Just me. I could hear the fear in his voice, the confusion, the same thing spinning inside me, like a tornado. I didn't plan this. I whispered back. I know, he said. Then why? I don't know. The moment between consequence and truth, there's a moment right before everything changes, where time holds its breath. That was this. We sat there, side by side, not touching but not apart, caught in the middle of something that couldn't be erased, but hadn't fully taken shape either. I didn't know what would happen next. I didn't even know what I wanted to happen. I only knew I couldn't undo it. And neither could he. He looked at me, really looked at me, like someone realizing the edge of the cliff he was standing on wasn't a metaphor. It was real. And he had already taken a step too far. I should go, I finally said. Julian didn't stop me. He just nodded, eyes full of thoughts he couldn't say out loud. I stood up, feeling the weight of that kiss echo through every part of my body. I walked back to my room, my legs unsure, my mind screaming. When I closed the door behind me, I fell to my knees. I cried, not because of what happened, but because I didn't want to regret it. And that terrified me more than anything. The next morning, silence again. Breakfast was awkward. Celeste had come home late and didn't seem to notice anything strange. Julian was quiet, but then again, he usually was. But I couldn't meet his eyes. I couldn't eat. Every sound in the room felt louder than it should have been. The clinking of the spoon, the low hum of the fridge, the ticking of the old wall clock. I excused myself before I exploded. Back in my room, I tried to work. I opened my laptop, pulled up my design files, tried to distract myself with color theory and type hierarchy. But my mind kept returning to one thing. His hands, his breath, that kiss. And how easy it would have been for it to go further. I told myself that it wasn't love, that it was confusion, vulnerability, emotional displacement, whatever excuse I could find. But none of it helped. Because deep down, I wanted more. And that realization broke something in me. The truth comes crashing day after that. Celeste left again for the evening, a book club meeting or something. I heard Julian in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner. I stood in the hallway for nearly 10 minutes, just listening. Then I walked in. He looked up, not surprised, not upset, just waiting. We need to talk, I said. He nodded. I know. We sat at the table, the same table where we'd shared meals, laughed, celebrated birthdays, pretended to be a normal family. Now, it felt like a courtroom. I can't pretend nothing happened. I said quietly, neither can I. What do we do? Julian exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. I don't know, Eliza. This isn't something I ever imagined. I don't even know what it is. I leaned forward. It was real. That's what it was. And for the first time, I saw him flinch. Not in anger, but in recognition. Because I had spoken the truth. The door that shouldn't have opened. We didn't hear the front door. We didn't hear the footsteps. But we both heard the voice. Julian. It was Celeste. Time stopped. She was supposed to be out until late. She wasn't supposed to come home now. I jumped up from the chair, panic seizing my chest. She walked into the kitchen a second later, and she saw us. Not kissing, not touching, but she knew. Her eyes moved between us, once, twice, And then she just stood there, like her brain couldn't catch up with what her heart already knew. Eva, she said quietly. That's what she called me. Always had. Julian stood up slowly. Celeste. But she raised her hand, not to stop him, to steady herself. Then she asked one question. What happened? Just those two words. But they echoed through the walls. Like a scream, neither of us answered, because we didn't have the words. She looked at Julian, then at me, then back at Julian. And then she turned and walked away, not out of the house, just upstairs. Quiet, controlled, like a storm walking in heels. What hurts in silence? What she didn't say. The house was too quiet. After Celeste walked away, the silence felt like punishment, like a sentence passed without a trial. Julian stood in the kitchen, motionless. I don't know what I expected, yelling, accusations, maybe even tears. But there was nothing, just silence, and it was worse than any scream. She didn't even say anything. I whispered. Julian shook his head, his voice hollow. She didn't have to. The next morning wasn't morning, and Allie didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed listening to every creak in the floorboards above me, every quiet shift of the wind outside the window. My thoughts looped endlessly. What did she see? What did she think she saw? What would she do? I expected her to confront us, but she didn't. She avoided me completely. The next morning, I heard her leave before sunrise. The front door clicked shut, like a final word. Julian didn't say anything either. The entire house had shifted, like we were now guests inside a wreck. The conversation that dug up crevice. 3 days passed before I saw her again. 3 days of silence, empty dinners, and pretending the air wasn't heavy with betrayal. Then, one evening, she knocked on my door. Just once. I opened it slowly. Celeste stood there, arms crossed, face unreadable. Walk with me, she said. I nodded, unsure what to expect. We walked through the neighborhood like nothing had happened. Like we were just a niece and her aunt out for some fresh air. Then she spoke. I don't need you to explain, she said, eyes fixed on the sidewalk ahead. But I do need you to hear something. I stayed quiet. She continued. I know what it's like to feel invisible. I have lived most of my marriage feeling that way. That stopped me. She didn't look at me. I saw something in Julian the other day, she continued, her voice thin. A softness. A closeness I hadn't seen in years. And it wasn't for me. I felt the burn behind my eyes. I never hated you, Eva, she said, her tone shaking now. But I do hate what you reminded me of. All the ways I lost him long before you got here. I wanted to speak, but I didn't know how to make it better. So she answered the silence. He's not a monster, and neither are you. But what happened? It broke something I can't fix, and I won't pretend it didn't. The storm Julian couldn't stop that night. Julian tried to talk to her. I heard them from my room, voices muffled through walls. His low, pleading tone. Her sharper replies. No slamming doors. No shouts. Just pain. And then the words that echoed. I can forgive distance. I can even forgive loneliness. But I can't forgive watching my husband fall in love with someone else under my roof. That's when I knew. This wasn't just about a kiss. It was about erosion. Years of silent neglect. Of wounds that had no bandages. And somehow, I had become the spotlight on every crack they'd painted over. What Julian said when he knocked 2 days later. Julian came to my door. I opened it slowly. He looked tired. Not just physically. Soul tired. We're separating, he said quietly. I'm sorry, I replied, and I meant it. She needs space, and I need to understand how I let everything rot. I nodded. I want to blame you, he said, but I can't. You were just the mirror. I was the one hiding. I didn't know what to say then. He stepped forward, not to touch me, not to kiss me, but just to be close enough to say what he needed to. That kiss, I won't forget it, but I also won't chase it. My heart cracked. He looked at me with soft eyes. I care for you, deeply, but I'm not the man you think I am. Not yet. Then he walked away, and this time, I let him go. The mirror we both avoided weeks passed. I stayed in the guest room a while longer until I found a new apartment. Julian moved into a condo downtown. Celeste stayed in the house. We spoke sometimes, but things were never the same. It wasn't just the kiss. It was the spotlight we had accidentally shone on all the brokenness no one wanted to see. Julian and I never kissed again. We never needed to, because the real intimacy wasn't the touch. It was the confession we never voiced, the ache we shared, the longing we couldn't justify, the ending that wasn't Elisa Medem's. People come into your life not to love you forever, but to show you something about yourself you couldn't face alone. Julian was that for me, and maybe I was that for him. Now, when I look back at that night, the room, the kiss, the truth that cracked everything open, I don't feel shame. I feel clarity. It wasn't about romance. It wasn't about seduction. It was about loneliness. About grief. About the desperate search for meaning in a world that forgets to offer it. And sometimes, the most honest moments we live are the ones we can never tell anyone about. Final words for viewers. Thank you for staying with me through this deeply emotional and uncomfortable story. Not every love is pure. Not every connection is meant to last, but every wound tells us something if we're brave enough to listen. This was the dark side of love. Subscribe for more real, raw stories that aren't always pretty, but always true.